तो मुझे सिग्नल Hello, dear aspirants. Some of you, or quite a few of you, might have taken the essay paper 2026 Civil Services yesterday, and it was quite an interesting paper. Last few years, UPSC, the marking patterns have been changing a bit, but this year, the question paper itself has got a little more exciting, and it appears that UPSC's expectation from you to put on your thinking cap, and a little bit of that to being that of a philosopher is getting a little more emphatic. But then it's all right, because after all, you do have a fair amount of exposure to uh, philosophy in your ethics paper. So that should not be a big worry. The first thing. The second thing is that uh, you don't have to be a kind of a thorough master in any subject. So still, the essay paper is considered to be and is expected to be uh, the domain of a generalist. So to that extent, I think it may not have caused any kind of the discomfort. But before we start talking about it, that is the 2026 yesterday's essay paper, I have something very interesting for you, actually something very exciting for you. And that I'm going to show you. We are very proud here at the Global Studies and our team that have putting together for the last a few months test papers. And if you are a bit cynical, you can say that we are plain lucky, but otherwise, very hard work, analysis, and then trying to figure out that what is being asked, the trend, many things that we have worked on in our team. And the surprise element that I'm going to introduce to you, that how some of the questions which have been asked this year, if you took our test papers, things must have been very easy for you, or to some extent, because not only you have written those test papers here, but also we discussed that those papers and see how the close resemblance to some of the questions that possibly could have. So look at this chart, and this is the first question of yesterday's the essay paper, that you took oxymorons reflect the ironies of life. Oxymorons reflect the ironies of life, and we will be discussing these topics after a while. But look at the main test series, that is the test series number 12611, and this is the question that in our test series that we already had given our students. They have written it. We have even discussed it here. So oxymorons reflect the ironies of life, and here it reads: reason has always existed, but not always in a reasonable form. So you can see obviously you cannot get the same words, but you can see the more or less the spirit, more or less the figurative, the expanse of the topic that is reflected here. Reason has always existed, but not always in a reasonable form. Then this year's essay paper, that is yesterday's exam that you took, look at the fifth topic. Nature is the symbol of the spirit. Nature is the symbol of the spirit. And again, the test series 2606. Nature does not negotiate with human ambition. Nature is the symbol of the spirit, and nature does not negotiate with the human ambition. So, for example, if you know some of the basics relating to that, and how this Emerson, nearly 100 years back, 90 years back, in his book Nature, when he wrote, and the transcendentalist, the movement and the ideas were having, and the similar things that we asked, that nature does not negotiate with the human ambition. Next comes, that's yesterday's, that is this year's question paper, the sixth topic. A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answer. And again, 2026-01, this year in test paper, this question that we had given our student who have practiced here, we have discussed all these things in details, that how to write them as well. The mind that questions is the mind that progresses. Look at the uncanny resemblance. A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. And here it reads, the mind that questions is the mind that progresses. So the questioning mind will always have more questioning mind, and how it shows that you have that critical faculty to look at the facts, to try to figure out that what is something about. Then look at another topic, that is the seventh topic that yesterday UPSC asked. Shelving hard decisions is the least ethical course. Shelving hard decisions is the least ethical course. And the main test series, that is 2606. This is what we gave students. Already we have given, students have written it here, and we have discussed it at great length, that how this topic should be written. And the trouble is, if you don't risk anything, you risk more. So it is the risking the faculty that we had emphasized, that is in terms of taking decision, or in terms of the taking certain steps which may appear to be a bit uncomfortable. Let's come to this year's the question number 8. A good leader is one who follows the followers. This is the question that has been asked. A good leader is one who follows the followers. Many students have written it. I received phone calls. The students said that we had a good grounding already, that what goes in this kind of topic, because we had also asked in 2616 in our main test series, that is, humility is the true ornament of the learned. Again, look at the uncanny resemblance. How does it make you feel? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 topics has got the uncanny resemblance. I will call it whatever, pure luck, uncanny resemblance, or then we have been analyzing, working very hard, trying to figure out the pattern of the previous years, and which direction mostly the UPSC essay paper is headed, how UPSC thinks about it. It's a kind of the difficult thing, but then look at the resemblance and the wonderful thing that has happened, and how it made the path of our students easier. Now, with on such a wonderful note, and that gives us great satisfaction and pride as well, I would like to go back to the question paper of the 2026 that we would like to discuss. But before we do that, now just one good look at it. Something for us actually wonderful, and equally wonderful, the students who have taken this examination, and many of you, the future candidates who want to take these examinations. It sounds, it's really enthralling, but let's come back to our other business. So this is the paper 2026, your essay paper, and the first topic itself. But before we start, I would like to just add a few things. As you know that in the recent few years, essay papers last few years, the essay paper, the marking pattern, there has been the slight change, and many people say that the UPSC is turning a bit a bit difficult because the numbers that students have scored, that has gone slightly less. That's not true. On the contrary, this year's paper is again wonderful and equally good. And what actually they are testing, that we discuss year after year, that they are trying to discuss your imagination, how far you are rooted in reality, and how the out of the box thinking you can do. And at the same time, how from the diverse areas of the lives you can bring the arguments and the facts and to prove the topic that the UPSC has given to you. UPSC guidelines itself, it says that you have to keep closely to the subject. So these are the things while discussing these topics we are going to follow. That is keeping closely to the topic. This is the most important thing because one may know a lot of things, but then topics sometimes, okay, the examiners might be in a very clever manner, might have selected these topics, but year after analysis and how things happen in the previous years and the tests that we give to the students, now things must be getting easier. Still, sometimes we deviate. So when we do the discussions, we will be ensuring that we keep closely to the topic, because deviating from the topic itself obviously would not bring any kind of the credit. The second thing that UPSC guidelines that expects you from the ideas in an orderly fashion. So you have to be a bit organized, the things that you are saying. So your ideas to be in an orderly fashion. These are not mine words. These are the UPSC guidelines. So this is the second thing. Another thing that they expect is that the effective and exact expression. So we will try to keep ourselves, restrict ourselves when we are discussing these papers. The first thing. Second thing is that the first thing that we will be doing while we're discussing this. Second thing that we will be doing is that lately some new trends are emerging of the writing the topics, because the topics are also slightly evolving. The marking pattern is also, there is a subtle change that is happening. So we have to be one step ahead of the demands of this paper. So the second one is that we have slightly evolved away from the old model of the Shaheli that I have been telling the students, but a few new approaches that we have adopted. Although this is not the right place to discuss all those things, because that happens separately in our classes. Here we are just about looking at the topics and what do we understand from these topics. So that is the second thing that we have to keep in a step with the changes that have begun to happen. And in our discussions, again, that same reflects in our classrooms when we learn the nuances and the nitty-gritty of the writing essays and everything that goes into that, including craft, language, logic, analysis, and how to write a very, very forceful argument, and how to be effective and exact in our expressions. Because effectiveness means while discussing the topic, you may have a lot to say, and you may have many tentative ideas, but then how to make it very effective, that is the argument that you choose, the ideas that you choose, the example that you choose to write in an essay, that matters. And then have to be exact expression, that is, you don't have to beat around the bush, or that is also, there is a big expression, the word in English, padding. Avoiding padding, that is merely to fill up 1000 to 1200 words. Unnecessary sentences or words or ideas we begin to write, so that needs to be avoided. And then there has to be a certain structure. This is, for example, one of the most the simplest form of the structuring that we tell students, that if there is a topic, and that is what we are going to while discussing it, if there is a topic, then try to start with the strongest topic or the most forceful argument first, and then in a descending order you can just go, and keeping closely to the topic, that is, don't go tangential. What is the topic, and within that you should write, even if you write wonderful arguments, wonderful facts, but if you are not keeping closely to the topic, then that certainly is not going to be very, very useful. So these are UPSC guidelines, and just for the sake of the kind of reminder and the approach, we pay a lot of attention, even if we keep adopting the new ways of the in our workshops of the essay paper here. So still we have to be mindful of these facts, because this has not changed. So keeping in view all these things, let's come to the first topic of this year. And look how simple it sounds. Oxymorons reflect the ironies of life. So oxymorons reflect the ironies of life. Sounds so simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 words like the and of and life. Such simple and ordinary words, and they create short, a very pithy sentence. But then it has got a lot that we have to bring out from here, that will constitute not only 2000 to 1200 words essay, but at the same time we have to ensure that we do not deviate from the topic, and we have to prove this without any doubt. So with all the forceful arguments. So look at the word oxymoron, for example. Oxymoron, actually the Greek word oxys, and moros. And the wonderful thing is that the word oxymoron itself is an oxymoron. This word itself is an oxymoron. Oxus and moros, that words come together. Oxus is sharp, and the moros is the not very bright. So that contradiction, that makes it so sharp and foolish words that come together. So oxymoron itself is you can see that in an oxymoron. But then oxymorons reflect the ironies of life. So what are the ironies of life? Our life itself has got a lot of the interesting thing that is going on, and many of the things sometimes goes beyond like the common sense understanding, and then we have to negotiate through those things in life. So thinking of the oxymoron and the life, the things that you can mostly, it basically talks about it in a rhetorical flourish whenever you use the word oxymoron. So oxymorons, when they constitute two words which are contradictory to each other, and when you talk about them, then they create a kind of a third meaning. And the words separately, for example, they can have separate meanings, but when they come together, they contradict themselves, they create a third meaning, and they force us to think. Forcing us to think about the contradictions in life, ironies in life, and the wonderful things that the changes, for example, that the life possibly could throw up. So, for example, look at the Hegelian dialectics. Hegelian dialectics, although Hegel himself would never use those terms, thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, but an idea that comes up, and there is always then the contrarian idea, and the contrarian idea an idea, and then how it leads to they come together and they try to sort out, that is the contradiction possibly could be there, and it leads to a synthesis or a new idea. So the contrarian aspect of it makes us think about something new that possibly could be go there. Actually, once you might have heard about Galbraith. He used a famous phrase that is called, you might have heard this phrase so many times, that is functional anarchy. Look at this word, functional anarchy. Galbraith, when he used this word, he was talking about in a certain context, but then functional anarchy itself kind of becomes almost everything that appears to be dysfunctional. But when we call it functional, then that forces us to think what possibly could mean, what possibly it could lead to. And this is the interesting thing, is that the many people, especially the people making commentary on India, Galbraith did not do that, but many people have described. Should we agree with that? At the people, persons who love our own country? Well, I don't know, but then some people have. India has been described as functional anarchy. How does it happen? For example, if you walk in a typical Mufassil road in India or a small city, barring some areas like the Lachins Delhi, where, for example, our parliament is there and the minister's bungalow is there, mostly that is the quite well organized. But any other place in Delhi or any other place, for example, in India, where there is a bit less of the control of the traffic, then you will notice that it's our country, we love our country, but still, if there is something, possibly something like this, then we can talk about it. So even you will see the cattle roaming on the road, people hardly paying much attention to the traffic, and people even coming from the wrong directions as well. As you know that in the Motor Vehicle Act now, the police would be filing an FIR if you are caught doing something like that. So the chaos almost everywhere. Most of the places that you go, you will find people, they are not following exact orders like striking, making a queue, or rather waiting for their turn, or maintaining the kind of the ambience that requires the silence. So those kind of the things, most of the time that is happening. So, but look at the word functional anarchy. It's an oxymoron, and this oxymoron describes India in such a wonderful the manners. For example, look at the another term. Here we are not only talking about the terms, but mostly we will be talking about it, that how in the different aspects of the life, the oxymoron has been successfully describing the vicissitudes of human life. For example, think of a place where you go to a hospital and you have a great deal of pain. So when there is a pain, then naturally you would be expecting relief, you would be expecting kindness, you would be expecting that exactly that you want to, that somebody will quickly do something to relieve the pain, but still the doctor has to do the certain procedures. For example, if it is some minor accident, or heaven forbid if it's a major accident, then the doctor will have to go through the maybe some painful processes for you. So that is a kind of cruel kindness. You might have seen the small kids, for example, getting extremely angry and saying unkind things about the doctor, but that is the cruel kindness for a dentist, for a surgeon, or many procedures that the things must go through. For example, look at in the modern times, the biggest problems, for example, Indian families I shouldn't say Indian families, but rather it's families anywhere in the world. So the children growing up and they turning, for example, say the teenagers, and they come in their own and the kind of the independent opinion that they start forming, and then that is the time for they developed some kind of the parenting becomes extremely difficult. Things turn into some kind of the love hate relationship towards their parents. Sometimes they're extremely angry or unhappy that how their parents are trying to instill discipline. Then they love their parents as well. And this wonderful contradiction, vicissitudes of the life that I have talked about, that how these oxymorons in the so well that they express. So, and then there are the certain other situations. For example, suppose uh, something unjust is happening. Something unjust is happening. When something unjust happens, then suppose in a crowd or somewhere you are the one who raised a voice, but then you are quite frustrated or you feel very bad. Just imagine that the other people are not coming to your call. Something unjust is happening, and you are shocked. You expect the other people to come and to say the same things, do the same things, protest or do something about it. Then sometimes you are met with a deafening silence. What is deafening silence? Sometimes the silence is so obvious. Silence is so much in your face that we end up calling it deafening silence. That is, silence itself is making huge lot of impact on our senses. So this is a wonderful oxymoron that defines it, that the deafening silence in the places, for example, the things that we expect that another example, for example, 1984, sorry, every time I have to change the page, then the color of the ink has to be changed. You might have read George Orwell's 1984 novel. Although it's a kind of a dystopian novel, but for the sake of the oxymoron, that is the one example. You can also call it a political satire. What happens in this novel that there is an expression that comes during this novel. The characters, the protagonists use it. War is peace. Oh, war is peace. Actually, so contrarian words to each other. But war is peace. Actually, I told you that it's a kind of a political satire. At the same time, it's a dystopian novel as well. So, war and peace, like in a typical oxymoron, the words would be having opposite meanings, but they come together, they create a new kind of situation. How does this novel describes this situation? War is peace. Here, people in control, they are constantly waging wars because the war they use as a tool to make people to stop paying attention or raising voices, or rather the protesting that if anything wrong with the state. So war becomes a kind of a ruse, kind of something that divert the attentions of the people. And so that is why they say that the being in a warring situation for a almost always helps them maintain the power that they are having. And then the war is peace. But just throw these words commonly at somebody and people will be simply puzzled how possibly the war could be peace. So with this, we can just move to next topic. You could be talking about the so many examples. For example, you might have read about the book The Selfish Gene. And The selfish gene, the book talks about the altruistic selfishness. If you have not read this book, then you will be slightly puzzled that what is this book about. Look, this book created a great deal of a stir. Selfish Gene, when this book was published, it created a lot of sensation. One of the most talked about book in the world. Darwin's evolution theory says something about evolution, but it said no, it's not the evolution, the meaning of the evolution itself. This book completely changed, and it says that actually it's our genes that constantly they are in a struggle and they're trying to express themselves, and in order to expressing themselves they resort to whatever action that is required in order to being extremely unkind to the several other genes. So it is a kind of complex argument, but it says that the genes are very selfish because they are mostly struggling for their own survival and how they can pass on the genetic characteristics. So in a sense, if you look at the genetic level, then this survival struggle look very fine. But then selfishness itself makes a kind of the oxymoron, that is the altruistic selfishness. That is, in a manner of speaking, they are trying to help the organism where that they innovate, and in that sense, the term that has been altruistic selfishness. But these two words somehow the kind of the oxymoron. क्योंकि एक तरफ selfishness है and the other thing is the altruistic, how possibly they can gel together. So focus of this topic is, the topic reads, oxymoron reflects the ironies of life. So what actually wanted to say that it's a tool to reveal the deeper truth or paradoxes of the life. And thankfully, the figures of a speech of the language that gives us this tool, and we so frequently use that. So, but at the same time, oxymorons also makes us ponder, keeps us active, and constantly helps us focus on finding that the normal or the sequential or the normally happening things, and beyond that, the questions that is being raised. So in a rhetorical flourish, this always keeps on our toes and makes us think. For example, the war is peace. So today's purpose was that discussing the topics and trying to understand that what do they mean and how to figure out that how to approach them. Because so we will be paying very short attention to the different topics, and maybe you can, for example, exchange your notes or rather compare your notes. Compare your notes is a kind of, again, it's a phrase that means that you could see that how you understood this topic when you saw the question paper, and the way we discuss is. So if there is any contradiction, and maybe some other day, some other time, we will be talking about it. Then let's come to the next one. That is, a grateful mind is very beautiful. A grateful mind. Well, we have wonderful examples in the world where the grateful people, they have gone to the extent to repay their gratefulness. But then once Seneca said, nothing is more honorable than a grateful mind. Seneca, as you know, that again, a Greek philosopher, the kind of the hold it has got even in the modern times as well, in terms of the Western philosophy. And but then looking at this topic, A grateful mind is very beautiful. So we look at the word gratefulness, and gratefulness is the one of the noblest trait of the human mind or humanity. One of the noblest. What are the other things that you might have heard about? For example, kindness, for example, love. But then, if somebody helps you, if somebody does you a favor, if the nature is giving its bounties without charging anything, or if you don't have to pay for the fresh air or the water or the kind of environment that you live in, if the selflessly a friend did something for you, if the state, a welfare state, a caring state are doing a lot of things for you, then the gratefulness becomes one of the noblest the instinct in the world that we can think of it. And it says that the grateful mind is very beautiful. Just turn it around, isko opposite kar dijiye, and just think about it, the ungrateful mind. So for example, the ungrateful mind, possibly there couldn't be a more of there could be any worse person than that. For example, somebody helping other people with their all the effort, money, commitment, friendship, and love, and still you have to face ungratefulness. Then there is the nothing more hurting than it. So it's one of the noblest the human instincts. Look at an example, or there is a story, and this story, it could be a story for us. For Mr. Patnaik, it could be a myth. But then, if you go to Kerala, and the people just live it with emotion, with gusto and devotion. I am talking about the Onam. So once there was a king called Bali, and he was a very, very kind king, very benevolent. He did such wonderful things for his subjects. So the subjects loved him so much. And then it so happens, like in our Puranic or in the old stories, that the, the wonderful reputation of the Bali, the reached gods, and the gods, and some of them became jealous. Then they went to the Vishnu, and they didn't believe that the Bali could be this generous. And then so what actually happens, that the Vamana avatar, that is the, you understand the person Vaman, the dwarfish, the height of a human that we are talking about it. So he became and came to Bali, and he was trying to test that what kind of a great person he is, and to what extent he can keep his words, because keeping your words is a matter of great honor. So Vamana avatar, he said that I want three steps of water. Sorry, the land. I mean, the land that I can cover in 3 steps, that much land I want. Imagine that you asking the king for such a small piece of land. King says, absolutely, okay, granted. Then Vamana, actually he was Vishnu himself. So in one step, the earth, another step, the Patala, and there was nowhere to put the third step. Then what happened? The Bali offered himself that put your third step on his body. Vamana, that is the Vishnu, was very happy with him. Then he gave him a boon. Up to Dantu, that he has already, for example, given the entire land to the Vishnu, but then he gave him a boon to Bali. What was the boon? Bali said that I have received so much love and so much, for example, the caring from my own subjects, that I would want to visit my subjects, the people with whom I lived as a king, that I would like to visit him at least once a year. So that is the festival of the Onam, like the 10 days festival that goes on. And the people in the gratefulness, the people being extremely grateful that what the Bali has been such a wonderful king and such a loving king and such a benevolent king. So, in the respect of the Bali coming and that gratefulness, they celebrate the festival of the Onam. But then, while talking about it, I just mentioned it because probably you will be you unfamiliar. But obviously, you don't have to write in so many words. But then taking some examples from the history or mythology, let's look at an example of the gratefulness from the modern history. After Second World War, mm, World War World War ऐसे लिख देते हैं World War II, many countries were terribly devastated. For that matter, if you go to the Netherlands or if you see Germany, Japan, many countries. For example, Japan was virtually destroyed to the great extent. But the Japanese, being very proud people, they wanted to rebuild their country. And look at the small size of the country and the fewer natural resources they had. Then what was the way possibly that Japan could have flourished again after the devastation of the World War II? The best things could have been research and development, technology, industry. So these are the things. And some people and some conglomerates, जैसे अभी तो like in India, every child knows the name of Toyota car. Toyota is basically the surname of a person at the time, how this name caught on. Toyota or the other conglomerates, they worked extremely hard with a great deal of devotion in the rebuilding of Japan. And you know, rest of the story, that how Japan turned out to be one of the greatest, the industrial nation in the world. Of course, America, and afterwards the next country that the name that used to come is the Japan in terms of the cutting edge technologies. In great deal of the gratefulness in Japan, the highest civilian respect and award that in Japan that they have for those conglomerates, Toyota, or there are a few other names. We don't have to go into that much detail. So in Japan, if you go at the name those conglomerates, Toyota, those names, people will simply bow to that. So the same, the feeling, the gratefulness, the feeling of the gratefulness. In our country, for example, great personalities in the field of the literature, art, politics, social development, statesmanship, people have contribute. And in grateful nation, how do we acknowledge our gratefulness and grateful nation? Giving Padma awards. So it says that the grateful mind is very beautiful. Beautiful means that mind is serene, calm, noble, honest, all the good things that the beautiful would mean. And grateful, that is, if somebody did you something, then being grateful is the least that one can do that. And that has been the parampara in our, for example, the tradition in our country. You might have seen, for example, a lot of people using very mechanically thank you and acknowledging that what the great things people have do that. Do you remember, for example, how many of you have heard of this great nazm? And like one of the copulate, although that is in Urdu and Hindi, but and it's an English medium class, so but still I would like to just recite it, because occasionally, very occasionally, you can take some examples from the Hindi, or for example any other Indian, Tamil or Bangla or Marathi. Actually, you simply cannot write in those scripts, or Roman or Devanagari script, or for that matter the script of the Dravidian language that you are using, you will have either to translate into English and write in the Roman script. But then I feel so tempted to mention one or two that is there in, for example, here in Hindi as well. Uh, you may have heard about that the great sacrifices during the national movement and freedom struggle the people in India made. Bhagat Singh is the symbolizes that kind of Chandrasekhar Azad. It's only the name of few, but then there are hundreds of them, starting from the Mangal Singh, and then the naming just a few of them. Then there are a lot of them, the Udham Singh, a lot of them that the names goes on and on and on. Once Nazm that was written, and one particular couplet of that is so popular in our country. It's like our national anthem and national song. Afterwards, three or four poetry in our country that is very popular. This is the one of them. It goes something like this. शहीदों की चिताओं पे लगेंगे हर बरस मेले. I don't want to translate it here. शहीदों की चिताओं पे, because चिताओं I want to translate and shahido and all that, so it's difficult. But when writing in English medium, probably if you could write it in Roman script and then could translate it, but it goes like शहीदों की चिताओं पे लगेंगे हर बरस मेले, वतन पे मरने वालों का यही बाकी निशान होगा. Actually, it was a complete nazm. But do you know who has written it? You wouldn't even imagine that who has actually written it. Jagdamba Prasad Misra. In 1916, he wrote in Nazm. This is the one of the greatest examples of a grateful nation, talking about it, the people who laid down their lives for the independence of the country that is in India. And remember, he was writing it, Shahidon ki chitaon pe lagenge, that was in 1916. And that was even before. And some people do associate that Rajguru or Bhagat Singh, they probably sang it, but there is no any proof of that they actually recited these lines. But that is not the purpose. What actually I'm saying, that a grateful nation represents itself in the such a manner. Then you might have heard about the Makhanlal Chaturvedi. It's again one of the most easily recognizable the piece of poetry that you can remember, Pushpa Ki Abhilasha. Last, the two lines, "O gardener, pluck me and throw me on that path where the great warriors or the soldiers, they are going to sacrifice their lives for the honor and safety of the country. मुझे तोड़ लेना बनमाली, उस पथ पर तुम देना फेंक, मातृभूमि पर शीश चढ़ाने जिस पथ जाए वीर अनेक." One of the greatest examples of the gratefulness. On 5th of September, Dr. Radhakrishnan's birthday and the Teachers' Day that is celebrated on 5th of September. It's again the kind of the gratefulness of to the, and respecting the teachers, because the kind of the role that they have played in the nation building, character building, or the making an aware nation and students. So these are the things that mostly we are talking about it. For example, in the eastern part of India, especially in Bihar, eastern Uttar Pradesh, there is a Chhat Puja. That is the almost everybody they knows it, because now through the social media, it's a kind of the pan-Indian expanse, and even in America or European countries or Caribbean countries, you can find people around the water bodies. This is again a kind of a gratefulness, that is the god Surya and the life giver, one who is the giver of the life, one who sustains the life, one who's the heat and the light and then that it sustains not only life but the flora and fauna. They get their life from the water cycle, the rain, monsoon, almost everything that is dependent on the Surya. So turning Surya in a divinity. and the gratefulness that turns into the reverence and the puja, the Chhat Puja. So these are the culturally we have been like this. Historically, we have been like this. We have got the way of the respecting, for example, the Padma Awards that I was talking about it. All over the world, the grateful people, they have been talking about it. Viktor Frankl, for example, you might have read, you must have heard about the Viktor Frankl and his book, A Beautiful Mind. Sorry, uh, A Man's Survival. So Viktor Frankl's, he has written that Viktor Frankl, the man's search for meaning, he's talking about it, that how in these camps where the Hitler's army, for example, they have thrown into, and the kind of the terrible experiences they were going through, but they will be, he has written in his book, Viktor Frankl has written that they were extremely thankful to the small mercies or the small pleasures that possibly could happen. For example, through the crack of their window, they could see this beautiful sun setting. Even that much, they said that you are extremely grateful because it makes them feel that life must go on. We must struggle, and the things will get better for us. So, A Man's Search for Meaning, that is the Viktor Frankl's book that I was talking about it. So, gratefulness to nature, gratefulness to the benevolent, the leaders, gratefulness to the teachers, gratefulness to the nature, and our freedom fighters, gratefulness to our soldiers. Not that kind of gratefulness where you saw that young lady in Ladakh. She's blurting out extremely unkind words for the Indian soldiers. I don't even want to talk about that. So that is ungratefulness of the very horrible degree. But still, there will be people who will be even supporting that thing as well. So anyway, that is, our country is made of a lot of contradictions. Let us restrict ourselves to this topic. A grateful mind is very, very beautiful. So this is the what you want to show in that topic. It shows good character and deep respect for, and it helps you build other positive traits. So it gives you then humility, then it gives you the love, then it gives you cooperation, then you gives up the further chance of the growth because you are grateful. So you understand that there's someone contributed to your growth, and how possibly that such kind of thing possibly could go on. You also might have heard a lot about this phrase, counting blessings. Counting blessings. Talk about it in your essay, for example, being extremely thankful for whatever you have got, your health, your life, your parents, or friends, or house, or the things that is around you, being thankful to that, and then of course working on and trying to have more and more. So this is the topic about the second topic. Let's look at the third one. कांटा कली का बदला हुआ रूप है. Why did I read it in Hindi? The reason is that I have actually to keep telling my students that even if you're writing your essay in English, but occasionally sometimes if the meaning of the, even, okay, you are writing in English medium, but then occasionally sometimes when the meaning is not quite clear, then you can have a look at the Hindi translation of it, and that makes things easier. But here that is not the case. It's already, the topic is very clear itself. A thorn is a changed bud. Such a simple word, such a simple term that has been given. For us, for those students who are not from the biology background, you must be familiar that what is being talked about. Biology student, they know it very well. Biology students know it, but for other people it could be a bit puzzling that what it is talking about it. Actually, the thorn is basically, it's a modified stem. So the bud, initially the journey of the bud that goes on the blossoming as a bud and flower, but the thorn also starts as a bud, but then the the kind of the biological circumstances and development that goes in the plant, so some of them turn out to be thorns. So actually it's a modified stem. Now, this topic is a bit tricky. This topic is a bit tricky. Tricky ज़्यादा नहीं है, just a bit tricky. And what is that trick that we have to look at it? This topic says a thorn is a changed bud. That means we are talking in this topic in a kind of the continuity. That is the literal meaning. You talk about the auxiliary, that the changes, and then in those biological terms and how it all happens. But then if you take the figurative meaning, then it shows that there is a kind of the continuity, figuratively continuity that is going on. So the bud will be the kinder aspects or personality, kinder aspects, indulgent aspect, then credulous aspect, innocent aspect, and thorn. Because when we are talking about it, the thorn, actually, so thorn is not there for the hurt, but thorn, for example, look at the plant of the rose. So thorns are there. Thorns are not there to hurt, but they are setting a limit. That is, don't come too close or hurt or pluck. So it sets a limit, sets limit and not attacks like in a snake or in a scorpion, or for that matter, like a charging bull. It's not attacking you. So a thorn is a changed bud. So the figurative meaning is that in our personalities, in our the most of the situation in life that we can live, we are living as a thorn and we are living as a bud as well. So thorn and bud, that means that this is a kind of the beautiful contradiction. And this contradiction is about the survival. And in plants, it has got the limited functions that you already know. But then what actually that means that we live a life of a bird, but then occasionally we have to turn into a thorn as well. And the thorn, figurative meanings possibly would be a lot of other things. So what possible the figurative meanings that we can derive from the thorn? So we can, for example, resort to force, power, retaliate, and mostly then we are smiling, soft, gentle, friendly, caring. So look at an example. For such a long time, and it's still going on. Everybody, almost everybody in India, for example, they talk about that Aman ki Asha. Aman ki Asha, that is the expecting that there will be the peace. For example, recently Netflix is showing something called a series documentary drama that is the Safed Sagar, and it shows that how the Lahore bus journey bud in hearts. At the time, our Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee traveling to Pakistan, and at the same time, the Kargil happening. So, well, India had to, and our security forces had to they have to turn into a thorn. And then we have to take certain steps. For example, recently in Kashmir, a most terrible incident happened. What happened and what circumstances happened, and those terrorists, what kind of questions they were asking and what they were doing, something that what happened. But then we had to, a peace-loving country, they had to turn into Operation Sindoor. So the topic actually talks about the thorn is a changed bud. So that means, in a manner of speaking, in thorn, bud lies in the thorn. And the thorn, since bud itself turns into a thorn, so bud also is a potential thorn. Or if this argument is not scientifically sustainable, but at least you can think that both have the same kind of the biological characteristics. So that is the what that we can think about it. And this is the terms of the international security and the international things that we are talking about it. But then look at the role of the parents, for example. Parents have to occasionally be a bit harsh and the bit forwarding and bit unkind towards their the children, because they have to safeguard them, because they have to show them the right path, because they have to discipline them. So the bud and the thorn analogy in the parenting is considered to be the one of the best possible thing that you can think about. So then another aspect is that look at the role of a teacher or a guru. How many of you have ever heard about the story of the Aristotle? Aristotle, what happened that there was a man who was kept insisting, going to Aristotle, that you must become my teacher. And Aristotle was not taking him as a disciple, but he was insistent. Every day he will turn up at the door of the Aristotle. Then Aristotle took him to a water body, some river or some kind of pond. And then, as you know, that the Greek teachers, Aristotle was a very strong-bodied person. So he held the head of his potential disciple and then shoved his head in water. Naturally, he was having the great pain and he was trying to come out. And then when it became unbearable, then the Aristotle led him to come out of the water. Aristotle asked him a question. How did you feel when I had shoved you in the water? Then this man said, all I wanted is to come out of the water. So Aristotle said, when you have that kind of a strong desire to have a guru and that kind of a strong desire of learning, only then come to me. So that harshness, that the thorn-like behavior of the Aristotle, that taught the great lesson to that person. So same way that we talks about the parents. Look at it, for example, our social contract, that is the Indian Constitution. So our Indian Constitution, it gives us fundamental rights, but then it also expects something from us, that is the fundamental duties. Although interesting thing is that fundamental duties are not justiciable, but fundamental rights are justiciable. So every time you think that your fundamental rights have been violated, you run to the High Courts or the Supreme Court under Article 32 and 226. But then when you do not fulfill the fundamental duties that are expected from you, that is the state expects, because it's not justiciable and nobody can do that. So probably our social contract, that is our constitution, should work as maybe as a thorn and as a bud. And there is already an argument going on that, like the fundamental rights, the fundamental duties should also be made justiciable. So that is how our social contract that keeps talking about it, that there are the many restrictions, then the fundamental rights that you enjoy. Then there are the laws or statutes which have got the the limits, or they put certain kind of the limitations of the many of your behaviors. You are driving, or the way you conduct yourself in public, or the wrongs that you can do, which, for example, BNS, that is the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, that talks about that, no, you can't do that. The state comes very harshly against you. And then if you hurt the nature, the environment, the people, the animals, then there are the different laws that the state would work as a thorn. But when the state is working as a benevolent person, that is giving welfare measures, it indulges in, creates security, creates roads, and the ensures the people's rights, education, and the turning the country, for example, the flourishing and the becoming the fastest growing economy in the world. So as a bud, that it would be the functioning as. So again, this contradiction, if I were to talk about it, that in our country, this moral contradiction of the bud and thorn has always been there from the days of the Gautam Buddha to Mahatma Gandhi, that the how much violent and non-violent we can be, how much we can pursue the path of power, how much we can pursue the path to the power to that extent that it is only for the self-defense. For example, the Indian armed forces, in the many circumstances where the military engagements, Indian armed forces work with a great deal of constraint, strictly following the Geneva Conventions. But the enemy countries, for example, they have behaved in an extremely the cruel manner. I don't want to tell you those stories. You already know that what happened, for example, during the Kargil war. You will, for example, India had a kind of the strong skirmish with China, and how they used the nail spiked rods, and how they attacked the Bihar regiment, all those things that you know that. But then in our country, we have been always emphasizing about the values. There are the Supreme Court judgments that talks about that for example, the legal situations, and if something that happens, how the law will take its own course. So this wonderful, I'm not saying that this dilemma is bad, but in thorn and bud, again, if I could recite the one poem that is written by Neeraj, again in Hindi. So using in English medium, the essays, the translation will work, but you can understand it. But the time is running out, so I have to other topics I have to take up. But then I'm just tempted to talk about the सीना है फौलाद का अपना, फूलों जैसा मन है. So it talks about the सीना है फौलाद का अपना, सीना है फौलाद का अपना, फूलों जैसा मन है, तन में विंध्याचल का बल है, मन में ताजमहल है. So Neeraj wrote it. In essay, if you want to use it, then certainly you will have to translate into English. I can translate it for you in English as well here, but then time is running out, and let's come to the next topic. Thorn will be the power of the Vindhyachala that is in our body, talking about the soldiers, and now the chest is made of the steel that will be to withstand the bullets of the enemies. So that is how we safeguard our nation, our borders. But the Fuller, that is the flower, and the Taj Mahal, that is the imagery that it's talking about it. We are also the birds at the same time. So this is the topic about, and you have to the drawing examples from the various areas, and that you deal with that, and you reach a conclusion. Because the ultimate purpose of the essay paper is that the topic that is given to you, and then you have to prove it with the all possible diversity that you bring in your arguments. Let's look at the next topic. When two elephants fight, it's the grass that gets trampled. True, very true. After all, it's an African proverb, and the people simply they keep talking about it. But as you know that, like whenever we are talking about a proverb, it does not only talk about the animal and the grass itself. Then it has got the figurative meanings. So what figurative meanings that you can associate with that? Literally, everybody understands that when two elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. So what actually happens that the elephant is a very, very large bodied animal when they're fighting among themselves. And when elephants fight, the fighting goes on and on and on for several hours, even for the entire day, they will be fighting. When they're fighting, then the long and short grass and and the fauna and the flora and the small animals, insects, they get smothered. So that is what it goes on. But what here does it mean? Here it means two powerful entities. And think about it. For example, look at the examples of the Hormuz. What is happening there? For such a long time, there was a lot of peace in the Hormuz, but there is a slightly the technical aspect that you might notice that uh, it's playing throughout this page. We will take care of that. So what has been happening? For example, the Hormuz, the two countries. Let's why not? If Iran is holding for such a long time a powerful country like America, so let's talk about the two powerful countries. So if the two elephants like the US and Iran, if they're fighting, then what is happening? The countries, for example, they peacefully would want to simply maintain their energy security, and the oil that is flowing from that kind of the area, Hormuz, and here the kind of their engagement that they're having, and a lot of the world that is troubled because wherever they want to for example they get the oil that should be passing through, then there are the powerful countries whenever they would be fighting, whenever, for example, almost everywhere in world war. I will rather change it to warring powers. So, for example, if in Ukraine, what's happening that for a certain regions, and since it's not an international relations class, so we are not going in depth, that for a certain reason, Ukraine and Russia are fighting. If they're fighting, but only yesterday, for example, this night, you might have heard that the twin drone attacks in Ukraine that led to the death of the 17 Ukrainians. So, for that matter, thousands of the Russians and Ukrainians, they have died. What is happening is that if you go into the nitty gritty of the war, then maybe you can change the dramatic persona. Maybe, for example, suppose the Putin was not there, maybe some other leader being there. So actually, it's the personalities of the leader or the leader, what they want to expect from it, the kind of the cultural hold they want to have, especially on the eastern part of the Ukraine, or rather for the ethnic or linguistic reasons, Russia thinks that it's their territory. All those things that we are not going into that because it's not an higher class kind of the things. But then what is happening? Common people are suffering. For example, look in the parliament. In parliament, parliamentary democracy, parties have every right to protest, every right to walk out. They have every right to raise issues. They have every right to indulge into arguments. They have to every right to do that. Everything that is happening, they're doing it within the parliamentary democratic rights, and endless these rights are in any democratic countries. But what is happening? Sometimes, would you agree that sometimes the political parties would have their egos, or political parties would be playing very obstinate? Even doing this is all right. Law allows them to do that because it's very, very difficult to interpret where they are being obstinate, where they are playing to their egos. But what actually is happening? Who is suffering? Many laws that is being passed by the parliament, either through the voice vote or limited arguments, limited discussion, and the chances are that we may not get good laws, because if the parliamentary debate does not happen, parliament does not function. So who is the greatest losers? The common people. Common people. For the people for whom these laws are being made, and how these laws will be implemented, and what kind of the impact it will have. So these are the things that mostly that we have to talk about. And then if that is happening, then the two elephants, the imagery will be the many political party or large political parties, they in a rightful manner. I'm not criticizing them. Yes, let them do that. But then the parliamentary function happens, and you must know the economics and mathematics of that a lot of money that goes into that, though. So how that we are at the India is losing a lot of money as well. There are several things that we could possibly talk about it, but this is the one of the topics which has got the strong contrarial elements. Jisko keep you might have read about it as, for example, sometimes taking topics like on this formula, that is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So, for example, look at from the aspects of the grass. Grass, that is the common people at the receiving end. For example, in the society, two powerful warring factions are fighting, two khap panchayats are fighting, two communities are fighting. Then again, a lot of common people would be suffering. So the example goes on and on. The country, societies, parliament, for two corporate sectors fighting, and mostly a lot of things that goes into that. So we are taking the debate somewhere else. We are looking at now the antithetical approach, that is the contrarian aspect. Is the grass eternally doomed to be trampled? Is the grass eternally doomed to be trampled? The answer could be no. So grass, for example, will still regrow. It has to maintain its resilience, because the grass is the imagery of the common people. Grass is the imagery of the weak people of the simple societies, people who do not have the strong voices, people who simply cannot the elephants from the fighting. So you have to write from that contrarian perspective. And then sometimes the fight itself is good for the common people as well. For example, hypothetically speaking, suppose the two companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they're fighting among themselves, although the products of the both companies, it's not very healthy, but just for a hypothetical situation, just understanding it. So this competition will lead to what? Their fight will lead to what? Prices going down, quality improving, quantity. I should have taken some other example, but then most of the industrial products and the competition. For example, let's say the white goods, for example. Suppose LG and Samsung having the kind of the market warfare, though elephants fighting in the marketplace to having the greater access to the market. What will lead to? The greater, for example, the customer satisfaction, better services, better qualities, prices. So that is how sometimes it works better as well. So from the contrarian aspect, you have to write that how the grass will survive, how the grass can protest, how can grass regenerate itself, and the symbolism of the regeneration, and creating the certain kind of the unity and making their voices, or sometimes the resistance, that is how the grass can have their voice. But here in this imagery, if you think in terms of the inanimate objects, then certainly they will think that how possibly grass can do that. But the grass, if the symbolism is taken to the weaker or the common people, then you can understand what I'm saying. Grass can, for example, imagine the grass chooses its leaders. Imagine, just for a second, imagine that US had a different leader. Trump was not there. Who knows? The fate of the tariffs, the fate of the Hormuz, the fate of Venezuela might have been slightly different. Who knows? If the Putin had not been there, maybe the things would have been different. Things would have been slightly different. So in essay, for example, we may need to sometimes avoid taking names, but you can say that in international affairs, some countries who are working for example, in a very high-handed manner, imagine that those countries had some benevolent leaders, or who were not so much obsessed with such kind of issues, then probably the things will be there. But who can ensure that these leaders are not there? It's the grass, that is the people, that is the common people. So that is the imagery of this topic. Let's move on to another topic, because still we have to cover. This is the one topic that I am a little hesitant to discuss, क्योंकि इसको discuss करने का, nature is the symbol of the spirit, and a lot of things need to be described. Let's see whether this page is working or not. Have you heard about it? Let's change the ink quickly. Transcendentalist movement. Have you heard about it? Have you heard about it? Emerson, you must have heard about it a lot, because a lot of quotation. Many students are so fond of reading quotation books, or the newspapers. Many newspapers publish the quotations. So Emerson's the great ideas or the quotations that keep coming up. In nearly 100 years back, or nearly 90 years back, that was 1930s, Emerson wrote a book called Nature. And from there, the line, nature is the symbol of the spirit. So nature is the expression. A spirit here, it's talking about the great, the supreme power. That is, you can treat it as a god, you can treat it as the someone that who oversees almost everything that happens in the world, or the greatest spiritual power, or the god, or for that matter, in that spirit, whatever that you look at it, it says that the nature is the symbol of the spirit. So the supreme authority, or maybe the god, that expresses itself through the nature. So the nature in itself is the embodiment of what the spirit is, what the spirit expects, what the spirit should look like, what the spirit, how lovely it should be, how perfect it should be, how we need to learn from it. And for us, this is something that is to emulate, learn from it, interpret it. So this is what he was talking about it. But Isha. This is the opening line. Ishavashya idam sharvam. If you have read it, the divine presence is every single living and the non-living things. Isavashya idam sarvam. So, do you think that it so strongly, so clearly resembles the Vedantic philosophy? So, dealing this topic in the examination, we will have to delve into the, the Western philosophical postulates because, again, the emergence ideas and the transcendentalist movement, they draw a lot from the Immanuel Kant. Again, that is the Immanuel Kant that they draw a lot from. So, taking on the Immanuel Kant and talking about it, for example, the Vedantic philosophy, and then they're talking about the Ishopanishad. That is the this is only the first three words. Actually, it's a verse, long verse. So I possibly cannot write it on this board. And then besides that, Sanskrit, the Vedic Sanskrit, for example, will be a bit difficult for me as well. Isavashya idam sarvam, because I myself might have read a lot of things in the translation for it. So core message of the opening line, Ishopanishad ka, the same thing is there. And the here again, the nature and the spirit, and Immanuel Kant saying that whatever we see, that is in terms of the expression of the supreme, he called it phenomena. You might have understood by now that this topic is not for everyone. Those students who are a bit more philosophically inclined, they might have dealt with that. So I wouldn't be spending a lot of time on it, except for the a few broad aspects I will talk about. I will quickly move to another topic. So phenomena, that is the kind of the expression that we see around. And then he said that the idealist, the complete, that is the phenomena which we cannot see. So what actually we see is the phenomena. And it says that the region that we have to use, for example, so Immanuel Kant, and this movement was deeply influenced by Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant talked about that how possibly would know that the nature and how would you decide that how we conduct ourselves. So his famous phrase you must have heard about, uh, whenever there is a moral question that comes before you, that what is the right thing to do, because it says that the spirit expresses itself through nature. So everything that is nature, that needs to be taken, not only the learned from it, but at the same time taken or dealt with tenderly. So how would we know that how we conduct ourselves? Then Immanuel Kant talked about the universalizability test. रहने दे दें. Let's leave it. Universalizability test. That is, how does it work? It says that if you are ever faced with any question that how to conduct yourself, you universalize it, that how everybody would do it if it were to write, how the entire universe, and then you get the answer. So that is the right answer. So Mahatma Gandhi, for example, Mahatma Gandhi was also the ideas of the Immanuel Kant or the Vedantic philosophy that he was quite impressed with. So in Chauri Chaura, what step Mahatma Gandhi that did is universalizing the very idea that can I allow a little bit of violence in Chauri Chaura and allow the national movement to go on? Then he universalized it. And the answer was that at no place, nowhere, any compromise could be made with the universal, for example, postulate that you've adopted yourself, that is the non-violence. If it has happened, then it applies everywhere, then it needs to be drawn up. So he the Mahatma Gandhi that took up that idea, the complete universality, universally looking at it, no compromises with the sadhana and the sadhya, that is the goal and the path that is taken. So absolutely no compromise with the path that is taken to achieve the goal. So if we have to reach the goal, the path has got to be completely perfect, or rather the flawless, and little bit of something that happened. Many people said that why not to let the national movement to go on, but Mahatma Gandhi said, let's just stop it. This topic actually a bit more complex, a lot of things that goes into that. So many students will feel a little uncomfortable. So it also talks about, since the nature is the symbol of the spirit. So again, think of the Vedantic philosophy, that it says that the Atma is not different from, and Atma is not different from the Brahma. Brahma is kya hai? That is the pure universal or the supreme universal consciousness. That is the spirit. So you will find a lot of, let me use a Hindi word, samya, that is the closeness between these two ideas. And then based on this philosophical tilt, we have to look at the world, that the world is the expression of the divinity, the nature is the expression of the divinity. That means it's talking about the non-dual nature of the cosmos. That is again the same thing. That is the Vedantic philosophy that talks about it. And that it says that the Mahatma Gandhi, for example, said that we have to take care of the lovingly the nature, interact with the nature, learn from it, interact with it, not being violent towards it. And nature would mean everything, fellow human being, animals, the forest. And then remember what Mahatma Gandhi said, that the earth has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for someone's greed. That Mahatma Gandhi target, that reflects the meaning of this topic. A lot of other things that possibly could be said, but then for the general readers, this topic was slightly baffling. Maybe on this some other platform, some other time, we will have a greater discussion when the audience is interactive. The next topic, a well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. Really? So, questioning. Always have more questions. Who will be asking questions? For asking the questions, you need to have intellectual freedom. Let's go to the next page. Education. Yeah, education का बहुत broad meaning है. That education has got the very, very broad meaning here. That is the wisdom. That is the ability to look at the different aspect of a fact. And that is what the topic says. A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. So, for example, there is a small child called Nachiketa. Where have we heard about Nachiketa? That is Katha Upanishad. And then you know the long story, then how he goes to Yama, and Yama is surprised with the resilience of this child and the kind of the great the deep philosophical question that he's raising challenges Yama and the forces Yama to answer in a kind of the verbal duel and answer his questions. Yama becomes very happy with him, and the later on the what happens and all those things. So Nachiketa, Socrates, for example. Socrates, he always said that the only thing that I'm aware, only thing that I know, that I don't know anything. So Socrates जो dialectics हैं, like the by asking questions. So for example, suppose a person would go to the Socrates and he claims that the gods are always right. as you know that in Greek mythology, when we talk of the gods, that is usually the gods' characteristics is quite different the way we understand in India. The gods have got the both the divine and the human attributes as well, and they have jealousies, they have anger, they fight among themselves, and the many things that happen. But then the people would fear them, people would have the kind of the reverence for them. So somebody who went to the Socrates and would say that the gods know everything, then Socrates would not come into a fight, come into resisting that idea. And well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. Then Socrates will ask him, keep asking him questions that, okay, the gods are always right, they know everything, that's very good. Then Socrates will ask, so do you think that the gods sometimes disagree with themselves? So the fact is that the many times gods fight, many times the gods have a different point of views. Then that person, yes, the gods have sometimes the different point of views. Then the next question the Socrates will ask, then do you think that they sometimes they fight for those facts or those things? Then that person will agree. Then he'll say, then the chances are that the one will be right, one will be wrong. Then the person will say, how possibly that the both can be right if they are fighting on the same fact? So the person grudgingly, that person will be agreeing, okay, I agree that the one of them wrote. Then the Socrates will, then isn't it, then doesn't it appear that the gods, one of them could be wrong? Then the game is over. That person thinks that yes, then one of them could be over. Then if they can be wrong, then how can you say that the gods know everything? So this is the spirit of asking questions, how this topic the glorifies. Well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. So for example, wherever the questioning is thwarted, or for example, the forcefully taken away from the system. Again, for example, we can give the example of the parliamentary discussion. All the students and audience that is sitting before me, everybody has studied constitution because that is the compulsory reading in your education. You must be knowing that the parliamentary discussions are its importance. I don't even have to talk about. But suppose if the parliament does not function well, then parliamentary discussion will not take place. Then the parliamentary values, it will come down. Then the kind of the thriving democracy that we'll talk about will get weaker. So that questioning mind is there, but then how will make it happen that the parliament has to be function? But what is coming in the way? Because the parliament is not functioning. So a well-educated mind will always have more question than answer. That is the topic. When we are talking about it, then our society needs to create an atmosphere that where you can raise your questions, you can raise your contradiction. Nachiketa raising his questions. And remember that if you think in terms of the classical civilizations like Assyrians, Greek, Roman, capital R, is it right here? Even classical Chinese civilization, all of them are gone. They do not exist. So, many of the symbolism, the words, the language, what they stood for, they have virtually vanished. But the Indian civilization, the way we know it today, is still persisting. Why? Because in Indian civilization, I can give you numerous examples, but then the time is short. But then let me put it in one word, that we always encouraged cerebral questioning. So the Lokayats will come out with a completely contradictory philosophical postulates. Still, they will be accommodated. Then there will be the the some philosophical ideas we didn't even believe in the Vedas and the way we know theist and atheist philosophies, and still they were accommodated. So we have been a kind of a intellectual seekers. Constantly we are thinking about the question. And in you must have heard about the Nasadiya Suktam. Nasadiya Suktam, that is the Rig Veda, and probably in some of the television programs you might have seen that how that gates sometimes that you start with the various ideas. So Nasadiya Suktam that starts, and it talks about asking questions that how the universe started, who made these stars, what were the conditions under which the universe came up, and the Nasadiya Sukta of the Rig Veda that said the who can answer it or who knows it. So that is raising the questions, the first thing. And second thing is that in a very, very humble manner, accepting that we do not have the final answer, foolproof answer. So continue being seeker. That is research, ask questions, find answer, continuously try to look for answers. But in reality, the many civilizations in the world, in one stroke, they gave the final answer to everything. Look how this world universe was made. This is the way the universe is. This is the day on which the universe will vanish. And this is the how what will happen. And all those things, they're the certain kind of the certitude that you will find in many philosophical or spiritual ideas in all over the world. So that is the one reason that most of them have vanished from the planet Earth. But then look what the Nasadiya Sutram, that is the one example I'm giving. Again, I could have talked about a lot of things. Look, somebody called Galileo asking questions because the heliocentric, that the idea that the idea that was uh, given by him, that was in contradiction to the prevailing idea at the time. And what happened at the time? Galileo was, for example, he was arrested, and then, of course, at the time the Pope said that in his own house that he will be the house arrest will continue, and for such a long time the things continued, and later on the very spirit of asking the question was thwarted. So our topic that says that the well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. That means continuously being the seeker, continuously asking questions, continuously trying to find the new paths, because the certitude is not there. So constantly dimensions are changing, problems are changing, the situation is changing, the universe is changing, and constantly the new questions are coming up. So that is how we live with it. And this is the topic, sixth topic, that we have got: a well-educated mind will always have more questions than answer. So that is how we take it up. A lot of other things possibly could be talked about it, but that is for some other occasions. Let's come to the two more topics that we have to look at it. Shelving hard decisions is the least ethical course. So shelving hard decisions. Who shelves the hard decisions? You might have heard this phrase again and again, that in the interest of blah blah this, we have to take hard decisions. In, for example, security matters, India had to take a hard decision. Operation Sindoor happened. In 1990s, the economic condition, for example, in India was going through a huge lot turmoil. Then we had to hard decisions. At that time, the Prime Minister Narasimha Rao was there, and Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister. And you know that how difficult those decisions were that were taken at the time. If you read the entire story, many of your students, your economics teacher might have taught you in the class that this decision was taken at that time, how the strong contrarian voices were there, and how finally the personality and the confidence and the understanding of the Narasimha Rao, at that time Prime Minister, finally helped Dr. Manmohan Singh, Finance Minister, to move on that path. So Solving hard decisions is the least ethical course. What actually means solving? That will be about the this idea of, it's talking about what is popularly we know as procrastination. And there is one particular Hindi poem, Kabir Das. It's so popular, especially in the North India. Virtually every student, every person, they recite it. They keep talking about it. That is, it will be a good idea to translate into English and then write it here. In Hindi, in the language of Kabir Das, it reads something like this: कल करे सो आज करे सो अब, पल में परलय होएगा, बहुरी करेगा कब. So what you have to do tomorrow, do it today. What you have to do today, do it right now, because you may not know that what situation may present itself, and that will lead to some kind of the situation that will be beyond your control, or you may not be able to handle it. So do it, whatever that you have to need to do it later. And this is what it is talking about it. But then look at it, how the world has been functioning, solving hard decisions. So I will give you, for example, a situation that comes from the Munich Agreement, for example. 1936. That was the time when the Hitler was in his full flourish. The way Hitler did things, that was quite obvious that the things that he was doing, all the student of the world history, you must be very much familiar with that. So I don't have to tell the entire story, except for that in 1936, the Hitler had captured what is today, although that does not exist the way it existed at the time, the major part of Czechoslovakia at the time. But in Munich Agreement, the British Prime Minister Chamberlain, who, of course, at that time, the British was world's leading power. After Second World War, the British started losing the kind of the hold, but then the leading power in the world, the British Chamberlain, then the President of France, they were been extremely indulgent, and they had a Munich Agreement with Hitler, allowed him to hold the major part of the Czechoslovakia at the time. Imagine that the British, being the most powerful nation in the world at the time, France, America was there. If they had resisted and tried to stop Hitler at the time, but they did not do that. They thought that the peace, maybe there will be peace. Let Hitler do this thing, and Europe, there will be peace. 1938, Hitler again annexes Austria. And then what happens then? Even at the time, even for example, at the Treaty of the Versailles, according to the postulates of that treaty, Hitler was not supposed to do that. And he was doing the wrong thing. Still, he was not strongly resisted by the world powers at that time. What the world has to face, what the later on the world had to face, that was the world had to pay a terrible price for that. So that is the kind of the story, that is the kind of the things that have been happening. Look at the solving hard decisions. Many students, for example, if you are, you must have read about the Right to Information Act, RTI, that in your ethics paper, your teacher Sahab must have taught you. So look at it. The one big problem that we face in our the bureaucratic structure in our country, red tapeism. What happens? That the files, indecisive officials or the minister continuously, like the one ruse or another in the terms of the administrative niceties that they keep citing, and the decisions are delayed, goes on being delayed. Since we do not have much time to talk about it, but you all know very well that how sometimes the cost escalation of the particular projects or the particular steps that needed to be taken, the cost start rising, then also the kind of the damage it might be doing for not taking the certain decisions. So solving the hard decision, it becomes easier. Easier means you simply don't have to do anything. Then you are having easy time. Why to take decisions? Because if you take the decisions, then you will have to look at the different aspects of that, and the thing continues. And this is the one of the biggest stumbling block in development, in justice, and the many such things that we may talk about it. For example, look at the, although we have to be extremely guarded in terms of while talking about judiciary, but what is there? 5 crore, 5 crore cases are pending in the law courts in our country. First thing. Second thing is that a gentleman called, what is the name of the elder son of Dharmendra? I don't recall his name right now. That is Tariq pe Tariq. So I'm not talking about the judiciary, for example, the blaming for that, but the judicial process itself. Solving hard decisions, judicial process itself, sometimes it gets so slow because the entire, the dramatis persona in that is the lawyers, clients, judges, our laws, procedural laws, and laws, they are somehow, they are complicit in that, and the hard decisions are most often that is solved, and that leads to the loss of what? Think what you have studied in your ethics paper, that is the Dr. Rawls, that is the justice. Justice suffers. Justice is delayed. So on the various aspects, this topic, basically, we have to prove. What we have to prove? That solving hard decisions is the least ethical course. That is, it leads to all around harm. And which is the, for example, the most burning topics among the world. There are quite a few, but look at the climate issues. It was year 2015 that we had the Paris Agreement. In Paris, that we decided that, thank God, whatever happened so far, it's okay. But then taking it as a kind of the reference point, that is the Industrial Revolution. And from that time onward, we would not allow the average temperature on Earth to go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius. But then, again, a lot that possibly could be said about that. You students, you know very well that how this whole thing is functioning. The developed worlds, for example, the China is the one country that is putting together America, European Union, and India. All these three putting together, and if its carbon footprint even bigger than these countries, it's producing even the more energy than all these three put together. But then the many countries, they are not even contributing in terms of their financial commitments and technology transfer. Developed world is technology transfer. And the biggest irony is that there are the leaders like Donald Trump who have turned into the climate skeptics. So hard decisions we are solving that relates to the climate issues, and it's going to be catastrophic, because already, if you read the latest news relating to the climate change in the world, that already the world is going through the most terrible spell of the high temperature, El Nino, the kind of the, it's being talked about that its expression, that how it is also unprecedented. European, the heat and the issues that relates to climate, because it will become a current affairs class if I start dealing with all these things. So basically, this topic is about the solving hard decisions is the least ethical course. That is the most bad thing to do that. So that means we should be mindful that whatever comes at our disposal at a particular time, we must take steps relating to that. Let's look at the last topic of the day. A good leader is one who follows the followers. Well, it sounds, it reads a bit contradictory in itself, but then very rapidly think about that, who is a good leader. Think of this, start with some of the great people like Abraham Lincoln, who has been the, let's see how they have functioned. Abraham Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi. Think about some of the great leaders. For example, think of the Patel, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Abraham Lincoln, for example, famously associated with the of the people, for the people, by the people democracy that he talked about. He said that the aspirations of the people, the dreams of the people, and the people's wishes, that is the most important. And the leader must be mindful and sensitive to that. Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, there is a famous anecdotal story that once Mahatma Gandhi saw the huge the mass of people protesting and in a procession going somewhere, and Mahatma Gandhi was elated, and at the same time he was pondering. He said that the how these people's needs to the certain kind of leadership, and these people already are very wise. These people are already raising the right questions. I must provide them leadership. And Mahatma Gandhi's leadership was about understanding the needs of the people, blending with the people, making the feel that Mahatma Gandhi is one of them. And that is why one the famous Hindi poet was forced to write, उठ गए जिधर दो पग pag में चल पड़े कोटि पग उसी ओर. That is the Mahatma Gandhi, the kind of the mass following that he enjoyed in our country. He has become probably the synonymous with the national movement and the freedom struggle. Although in our country, the national movement and the freedom struggle itself has got the many streams, like the violent stream, then the many other things, then there are the individual contribution of the great people, but then Mahatma Gandhi's mass following is cannot be doubted. So this is the topic about it. The good leader is one who follows, and the prime minister of this country, for example, you will remember this phrase, although I would not much harp on that, because Pradhan Sevak, they're trying to talk about it, and even in the modern corporate setups, a good leader, for example, modern corporate setups, you might have, if you watch the older corporate stories, if you read that, you might have known that how the higher officials would be detached and sitting in the big corner offices, and they wouldn't have the kind of the brainstorming sessions. But in the modern corporate offices, for example, you go to the Southeast Asian countries, Japan, and to some extent in the US as well, that is being adopted. There is a hall full of the cubicles or the chairs where the people, or for example, if you go to the top the media houses or the newspapers, you will see that the most of the journalists, they were in the openness hall, that as if that they are from the so close to each other in terms of the communication, and the leader blends with the people who are working on a certain project. Look at, for example, the rocket scientist in our country, Dr. Kalam, kind of the humility and the kind of the blending with the people with whom they're working. He seldom behaved like a leader. And the way he turned around our space program, especially the rocketry that developed in India. So these are the things that possibly you can talk about it. And then even Nelson Mandela, for example, despite having spent more than 2 decades in the jail, he was not, he did not come out as a very bitter man. No, he was not. The famous shepherd metaphor you must have heard about. With this uh, shepherd metaphor, when he kind of the compared people, that the like a shepherd, the leader should be following, watching the instincts, the behavior, the needs, and the inclinations of their people. Like a shepherd, that the leader should be guiding the people. Like a shepherd, so thinking about the safeguarding the people. Like a shepherd, it's thinking about that where the nourishment and the food and the safety and the meeting of the goals that comes from. So the shepherd metaphor of the Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, that you can talk about that. So time is running out, and it can certainly go to the long debate. But do you think For example, a good leader is one who follows the followers. So the good leader who follows the followers would mean that the good leader is thinking about the welfare of his people. So the thinking of the welfare of the people would mean that taking the right steps for their people. But look, some of the contrarian aspect of this writing, if you had to bring in, then look at it, there's some leaders or the some politician indulging in freebies. Then some of them behaving in a very high-handed manner. High-handed manner. Then look at some of the stories that you keep reading about the entitlement that they try to display, the kind of the pomp and show with the hundreds of cars and for example the vehicles following them, and the kind of the power display that they might be doing, and how sometimes the leaders get detached from their own followers. So it says that the good leader is one who follows the followers. That is, following the followers here, it means that completely being mindful of the needs of the people, your followers, the first thing. Second thing is being humble. Third thing is that always putting at yourself at the second place and putting the needs and the desires and aspirations of the people at the top of it. So all these qualities only the good leader possibly would possess. And some of the leaders that I talked about that you can mention. So time has virtually run out. The basic purpose of discussing these topics was that just to look at it, that how you tried to write about it, how you understood it, and do you think that a few new things that have emerged in this discussion on a larger platform, someday, somewhere in classroom or somewhere, we may have much detailed discussions regarding these things. Then you can hear your own views as well, and we will have some hearty and the warm discussion relating to that. That will also help you decide that how to write on a topic like this. But thank you so much for today and for this evening. I hope that I had wonderful audience and the interaction that I had with you. Good night.